This is the true story of one of Britain's most violent and well-documented poltergeist cases, the Black Monk of Pontefract. In the summer of 1966, the Pritchard family, Joe, Jean, and their two children, Philip and Diane, were looking forward to a fresh start. They moved into a modest council house at 30 East Drive, a quiet street in the market town of Pontefract, West Yorkshire. It was an ordinary home on an ordinary street, the perfect place to raise a family. For the first few days, it was just that. Life was peaceful, filled with the sounds of boxes being unpacked and children playing. But as the sun began to set on those first few evenings, a different kind of sound started to fill the house. It began subtly, a soft knocking, almost like a neighbor at the door. But when they checked, no one was there. Soon, the knocking echoed from inside the walls, then from the ceiling. It would start and stop without any reason, a phantom rhythm that kept the family on edge. Then, small things started to happen. A salt shaker would slide across the kitchen table. A picture frame would tilt on the wall. The children, Philip and Diane, started complaining of feeling watched, as if someone was always standing just out of sight. A strange, bone-deep chill began to settle in certain rooms, cold spots that defied explanation. The air would turn icy cold in an instant, even on a warm day, making the hairs on their arms stand up. The family tried to rationalize it. Old pipes, drafts, the house settling. But the disturbances were too specific, too intelligent. It felt less like a house settling and more like a house waking up. The unease soon turned to outright fear. One evening, Diane was coming down the stairs when she froze, her heart pounding. At the bottom of the staircase, standing in the shadows of the hallway, was a figure. It was tall, shrouded in black, with a hood that obscured its face. It didn't move. It didn't make a sound. It just stood there, a silent, menacing void in the shape of a person. She blinked, and it was gone. She tried to tell herself it was a trick of the light, but the feeling of dread it left behind was very real. Soon, other members of the family started seeing it too. A fleeting glimpse of a dark robe disappearing around a corner, a shadowy form that resembled a monk. These sightings almost always happened after dark, turning the night into a time of anxiety. The children were terrified to go to the bathroom alone, and the hallway became a no-go zone. The house at 30 East Drive was no longer their home. It was a territory they shared with an unseen, unwelcome guest. The atmosphere inside grew heavy, charged with a sense of anticipation, as if something was building, waiting for the right moment to show its true power. That moment was coming sooner than they could ever imagine. The playful nudges of a poltergeist were about to give way to a violent, physical assault. The strange occurrences quickly escalated from subtle and unnerving to loud and terrifying. This was no longer about strange noises or cold spots. The entity was now physically interacting with their world in the most violent ways imaginable. Furniture, including heavy armchairs and a solid sideboard, would slide across the floor on its own. Sometimes these pieces would be thrown with incredible force, crashing against the walls as the family watched in horror. Objects would lift into the air, hover for a moment, and then slam back down, shattering on the floor. The family would return home to find rooms completely trashed, chairs overturned, and drawers emptied, as if a furious burglar had torn the place apart. The house's electrical system went haywire. Lights would flicker and die for no reason, and new bulbs would blow the second they were switched on. The family pets, usually calm, became frantic. The dog would bark and cower, refusing to enter certain rooms, its fur bristling as it stared at something unseen in the corner. The cat would hiss and flee the house, sometimes disappearing for days. It was clear the animal sensed the same malevolent presence that was now terrorizing the human occupants. The house was in a constant state of chaos. The Pritchards were living in a war zone, under siege from a force they couldn't see, couldn't understand, and couldn't fight. Every day was a battle for their sanity, and the worst was yet to come. The entity's focus then shifted from breaking objects to breaking the family itself. It began to target the children, Philip and Diane, with terrifying physical attacks. The invisible force grew bolder, more personal, more malicious. Philip, the youngest, was pushed down the stairs by an unseen hand, tumbling to the bottom but thankfully escaping serious injury. Diane was dragged from her bed by her hair, screaming as she was pulled across the floor. They would wake up in the mornings with unexplained bruises and long, red scratches on their skin, marks that looked like they'd been made by sharp fingernails. The nights became a living nightmare. Growling voices would emanate from the corners of their bedrooms, deep, guttural sounds that seemed to come from the very air around them. On one particularly horrifying night, Philip woke up gasping for breath. He claimed the black, hooded figure was sitting on his chest, its immense weight crushing him, its invisible hands wrapped around his throat. He fought for air, unable to scream, feeling his life being squeezed out of him. The pressure only released when his father, Joe, burst into the room after hearing muffled struggling. The attacks weren't just random acts of violence. They were calculated, designed to inflict maximum terror. The entity was no longer just a poltergeist. It was a predator, and the children were its primary prey. Up until this point, the horrifying entity had remained mostly a shadow, a fleeting figure seen in the periphery. But it was about to make its full, terrifying debut. One evening, several family members and a neighbor were gathered in the living room, drawn together for safety. Suddenly, the oppressive cold returned, thicker and more suffocating than ever before. The air crackled with energy, and a deep, animal-like growl echoed through the room, seeming to come from everywhere at once. And then it appeared. Standing near the fireplace was the Black Monk. It was no longer a shadow or a trick of the light. It was a solid three-dimensional figure, standing over 6 feet tall, completely black from head to toe. It wore the flowing robes and hood of a medieval monk, but where its face should have been, there was only a dark, featureless void. It was an absolute absence of light and life. The witnesses were frozen in place, overcome with a primal fear that paralyzed their bodies and minds. The presence of the apparition brought with it a wave of physical weakness, making them feel drained and sick. It stood there for what felt like an eternity, a silent statue of pure malice, before slowly fading away, leaving behind a lingering stench of decay and an unforgettable sense of dread. The entity had finally revealed itself. The Black Monk was real, and it was in their house. By 1967, the haunting at 30 East Drive had become a local legend, and word began to spread. A local newspaper photographer, intrigued by the incredible stories, decided to visit the house, hoping to capture proof of the paranormal activity. He set up his camera, not knowing if he would capture anything at all. He took dozens of pictures throughout the house, documenting the disarray left by the poltergeist. Most of the photos showed nothing out of the ordinary, but one image, taken near a doorway, would become one of the most chilling paranormal photographs in British history. When the film was developed, one frame showed something astonishing. Looming in the background, partially obscured by the door, was a tall, dark figure. It was blurry, but the shape was unmistakable. A hooded entity, seemingly caught in motion. Its form eerily matching the family's descriptions of the Black Monk. The photograph was a bombshell. It was studied by paranormal experts and skeptics alike. Some claimed it was a trick of light and shadow, a case of double exposure. But for many, it was the definitive proof they were looking for. The image was published in newspapers and became an iconic piece of evidence in the case. For the Pritchards, it was validation. They weren't crazy. The thing that haunted them was real, and now the world had a picture of it. The terrifying apparition of a monk begged the question, why a monk? The Pritchard family, desperate for answers, began to look into the history of the land their house was built on. What they discovered sent a chill down their spine. Their quiet council estate had been built on land that was once the site of a large Cluniac monastery, the Priory of St. John the Evangelist. The priory had a long and dark history. Local legends and historical records told the story of a 16th century monk from that very priory. This monk was accused of a heinous crime against a young girl. As punishment, he was found guilty and sentenced to a brutal death. He was hanged on the public gallows, which stood near the very spot where 30 East Drive would one day be built. His body was then thrown down a well, his soul denied a proper burial. The theory quickly formed that the spirit of this disgraced and violently executed monk was the entity haunting the house. Had the construction of the new estate disturbed his unholy resting place, awakening a spirit consumed by centuries of rage? The name, the Black Monk of Pontefract, was born from this discovery, forever linking the violent haunting to the tragic history buried beneath the foundations of the house. As the story of the Black Monk grew, it exploded beyond the small town of Pontefract, attracting national media attention. Reporters and paranormal investigators flocked to 30 East Drive, hoping to witness the phenomena for themselves. Many didn't leave disappointed. Seasoned researchers, armed with cameras and recording equipment, documented levitating objects, disembodied voices, and sudden, inexplicable drops in temperature. They confirmed that the Pritchards were not exaggerating. If anything, their accounts were understated. Desperate, the family turned to the church for help. Several priests visited the home to perform blessings, and even a full exorcism. But these attempts to banish the entity only made it angrier. Following the rituals, the poltergeist activity would intensify dramatically, as if the spirit was mocking their faith. The constant siege took a devastating toll on the family. They were physically and emotionally exhausted, living in a state of perpetual fear. Sleep offered no escape, as nightmares and physical attacks continued. Their home had become a prison and a media circus, and they were trapped in the middle of it all, with no end in sight. The house at 30 East Drive was no longer just a haunted house. It had become a public spectacle of supernatural warfare. After years of relentless terror, the Pritchard family finally reached their breaking point. Their health, both mental and physical, was shattered. They had endured more than any family should have to. Eventually, they made the difficult decision to leave 30 East Drive behind, abandoning the home that had become their personal hell. But the story doesn't end there. After the Pritchards moved out, the house was rented to other tenants. Unsurprisingly, many of them reported experiencing strange and unsettling activity. While the phenomenon never reached the violent intensity the Pritchards endured, the house retained its eerie reputation. Knocking sounds, cold spots, and objects moving on their own were common complaints. The Black Monk of Pontefract had cemented its legacy. The house at 30 East Drive gained a notorious reputation as one of the most haunted homes in all of England, a place synonymous with paranormal violence. Decades later, the story continues to fascinate and terrify. The events that took place there have been the subject of books, documentaries, and even a horror film. East Drive remains feared, a quiet suburban street that holds a very dark secret. Was it a restless spirit seeking revenge? A violent poltergeist feeding on the family's fear? Or was it something darker, something ancient, that simply used the image of a monk to manifest its evil? Whatever haunted that house in Pontefract did not want to be seen until it decided to be remembered.